Welcome to Kavieng in northern Papua New Guinea. I've decided to place my camera up there for some reason, so here you get a bird's eye view. Welcome to my hotel. Today I will be flying with Air Niugini on a DHC-8 Q300 bound for Port Moresby. After having spent one of the most fun nights I've ever had outside of Australia, being invited by locals to go fishing and cook on an open fire, I stayed at the local hotel here in Kavieng, which unfortunately isn't cheap for what you get. The hotel lacks any sort of basic amenities other than a bed, shower and a TV, but that's just the basics, so it'll do. It's understandable for a third world country, but for nearly 350 Australian dollars for the night, I felt completely ripped off. Kavieng also has a free airport transfer service, and whilst the airport is still within walking distance, it was very nice to have. Kavieng is the largest town and capital of the province of New Ireland. Saying that, the town is actually very small, having a population of only 1,700 people. The town was founded in 1900 by the German colonial administration around a large and very picturesque harbour on Balgai Bay. Today, Kavieng is home to a thriving tourism industry. You can go diving, trekking and surfing, with all of the tourism having something to do with the rich biological diversity of the area. To get to Kavieng, there is only one option, and that is to fly from Port Moresby. As stated in my introduction, today I shall be flying with LinkPNG Air, not to be confused with PNG Air, which is the alternative option to Air Niugini, and I'll be flying to Port Moresby via Rabaul. Upon arriving at the airport, I swiftly made my way inside to the check-in counter just over an hour before our scheduled departure time. As I stepped up to the check-in counter, I heard some chilling words from the check-in agent in that no Port Moresby bound passenger would be allowed to board today's flight. I effectively was stranded, along with a few other people who were travelling home to Moresby. However, after explaining to the on-duty manager that I could not stay in Kavieng due to numerous reasons, my boarding pass was handed to me and I was instructed to proceed through security. Security, expectedly, is very small with only one staff member present and is located down the hall and on the right-hand side. Post-security is a fairly decently sized waiting area for approximately 100 to 150 people. There is also a single shop filled with different PNG goodies off to the left and a cafe off to the right, which at that moment was closed. Eventually, our departure time arrived and left, until eventually my ride down to Moresby arrived. Today's aircraft is a 30-year-old de Havilland Canada -8 Q300 Classic, registered as Papa 2 Papa X-Ray Lima. She had a very long and extensive history, first flying for South African Airways Express in 1994, then moving very briefly to Orca in 1998, then to Videro later that same month. She was then moved to Voyager Airways in 2005, but 6 months later she went to the United Nations under a Canadian registration. Nearly 10 years later she was bought by Air Niugini, to where she currently remains. After pulling in on stand and shutting down, boarding was called and to my knowledge I was the only Port Moresby bound passenger to step on board. LinkPNG's DHC-8 300s are in an all-economy class layout with 50 standard seats and a 2-2 layout, with rows 1 and 2 on the right-hand side, facing towards each other. This morning I shall be seated in 3 Delta. The seat has 31 inches of pitch and 17 inches of width. There is a standard tray table that folds down but doesn't extend. In the seat pocket you'll find a safety card and air sickness bag. Above are individual reading lights, air vents and a flight attendant call button. Soon the props began to turn, indicating the start of the first leg, 49 minutes behind our scheduled departure time. We taxied to runway 12 via Alpha and runway 30. Now please enjoy this unedited takeoff. After takeoff, we made a few course-correcting turns, flying east over the island towards Rabaul. Flight time for the first leg is 40 minutes, covering a distance of 167 miles or 269 kilometers, cruising at 17,000 feet. Once underway, we flew directly over the rural parts of New Ireland, and in the distance was Cape Canaan, which is a part of Dowell Island, with a very small settlement on the water's edge. Soon the crew began the first in-flight service. I was given 2 cups of orange juice and 2 packs of shortbread biscuits, all of which were very refreshing and a nice way to start my day off. As we began approaching our first stop, in the distance was Cape Lambert, which sits in the province of New Britain. Soon we commenced our descent into Rabaul. The town of Rabaul and the airport itself doesn't actually sit in the same area, and they have quite the distance between the two, being roughly 25 kilometers apart. The village, or town of Rabaul, is surrounded by 4 active volcanoes, all of which can very clearly be seen. The largest, and by far the most impressive, is Mount Rabaul, which actually is a combination of 2 volcanoes to the north of the town. The last known eruption was on August 29, 2014. Hey, that was yesterday's date 10 years ago. I haven't explained yet why I was the only Port Moresby bound passenger allowed to board. We weren't told this back in Kavieng, but half of the runway here at Rabaul had to be bulldozed due to reconstruction purposes, leaving the aircraft with less than half of the usual amount of space required to stop and take off. This gave the aircraft a very serious weight restriction in order to operate safely. As my next flight was international, and on the same ticket, the ground crew back in Kavieng had no choice but to issue me with my boarding pass. Now please enjoy this rough and wild, unedited landing. We taxied back to the terminal via a short gravel strip and Alpha. We pulled into Gate 3 49 minutes behind our scheduled arrival time. Whilst we wait for the Port Moresby passengers to board and the Rabaul passengers to disembark, let's talk about where we just landed. Located on the far northeastern corner of the province of New Britain, Rabaul is one of the most volcanically active townships in Papua New Guinea and has a population of nearly 4,000 people. In 1903, the governor of German New Guinea set up a town in Simsonhafen and became the capital for the Germans during the First World War. On the 11th of September 1914, the Battle of Bitapaka took place, and this battle was with the German reservists and Melanesian police, and this was the first Australian action during the First World War. The British then captured the area, and not long after, the Japanese took the base in World War II. In 1943, Rabaul was liberated on the 6th of September by the British Pacific Fleet. In more modern times, the volcano of Tavovo and Vulcan erupted in 1994, covering the town in a blanket of ash. Nowadays, Rabaul is a hub for travel around the islands of northeastern Papua New Guinea, with destinations such as Lae, Lehia, Hoskins and most notably Kita. But for now, we have to continue onward to Port Moresby and to my flight out of Papua New Guinea. Soon the props began to turn as the engines restarted 39 minutes behind our scheduled departure time.
We'll point out the safety features installed on the DHC-8 300 series aircraft. Thank you for your attention.
We taxied to runway 28 via Alpha and the gravel pathway. Whilst we were turning around on the piano keys, I began to get nervous as I knew what this departure out of Rabaul was going to be like. Now please enjoy this thrilling, unedited takeoff. After a close call on takeoff, nearly hitting the cones below, we turned left over the Bismarck Sea, setting a southwesterly course for Port Moresby. Flight time for the second leg was 1 hour and 55 minutes, covering a total distance of 531 miles or 856 kilometers, cruising at 28,000 feet. Once airborne, during our initial left-hand turn, we flew over Kokopo, which is one of the few towns along the Kokopo-Rabaul highway. Later on, we flew over Mount Ulawan, which is an active basaltic to andesitic stratovolcano, with the last major eruption happening on the 20th of November 2023. Not long after this, we were served another round of juice cups and shortbread biscuits, all of which were very nice, though I would have preferred something different for the second leg. My wish came true, and I was soon served a cup of cool water. After having crossed the Solomon Sea, we flew directly over Papua New Guinea, and in the distance was the Kumusi River, which at the southern end is located very close to the Kokoda track. On board the aircraft is a single bathroom located behind the cockpit, with everything you'd typically expect to find for this aircraft type, except for running water. Soon we commenced our descent into Port Moresby. In the several instances where I have flown either over or into Port Moresby, the weather in my findings tends to be very cloudy and overcast, but not gloomy. The addition of clouds makes the views much more interesting in my opinion. Not knowing much about the area surrounding Port Moresby, I had absolutely no clue what was below. However, in saying that, once the gear was lowered, I knew we had aligned with the runway, and with that we would be landing relatively soon. Now please enjoy this unedited landing. After landing, we taxied back to the domestic terminal via Foxtrot, Alpha and Charlie. We pulled into remote stand 9, 45 minutes behind our scheduled arrival time. As I stepped off the aircraft, being relieved that I had made it to Moresby in time for my international connection, I quickly proceeded to the terminal building, expectedly from the furthest possible stand from the terminal. Flying on LinkPNG Air was quite the interesting experience to say the least. Let's start from the beginning. At the time of check-in, there was no real reason given as to why Port Moresby passengers were not allowed to board, and we were told that we would be rescheduled on the following morning's flight. However, as time passed and I got to see Rabaul Airport, the reason, at least to me, became much more obvious, as safety was the primary concern, and when it comes to flying, it's the first priority. Once on board, the crew were friendly enough, but they disappeared once the seatbelt sign had been switched off, only appearing to serve food and water, and then once to collect the rubbish during our descent. What made this whole adventure up north worth it to me was definitely the views outside, as it's not often that you get to fly around volcanoes, rainforests, small towns, and ocean all in the same flight. So, would I recommend you to fly domestically in PNG? And to that, I say no. The stress caused by this whole situation was too much for me, and I think I only just got out of it due to pure luck. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Make sure to check out my other videos that I have on my YouTube channel, and also I now have a Discord server. Feel free to join, link at the top of the description. And don't forget to ring that notification bell if you enjoy my content. And if you want to see more, I post my videos at 8 PM Sydney time. And I hope to see you again in the next one. See you later!